Good morning. It is November 23rd, Tuesday, regular board meeting. We have all three commissioners in the chamber, the administrator, clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Scrivener's error on date of last week's meeting minutes that were posted and approved as September 23rd were actually October 21st. So that's just an announcement. Next, we're into office business. Leave the vouchers. We only got one, right?
One voucher today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $1,362,540.31 as presented, and note that it has been signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And I believe we have two items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 and 2.
Second.
There's been motion and a second for items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next is our commissioner administrator updates. Keith?
Thank you. Yeah, spent most of last week in Spokane at the Wasatch Conference for county leaders. Had a number of sessions on items that are important to Franklin County, and had a chance to meet with my counterparts and other county administrators across the state for a meeting to kind of share information of what the issues are in their counties. They're a lot of the same ones that we have, with ARPA focused right now, year-end budget planning, and kind of looking forward to next year. Some of the legal decisions that are affecting counties. The Blake decision is had a big impact. Spent some time at the Legislative Steering Committee listening to what plans are for upcoming legislation that Wasatch is supporting and following. And then, of course, spending additional time here on the budget, working with the state auditors on our current audit that is in field work right now, and getting ready for next year.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck?
Was also at the State Association of Counties and state leaders meeting last week in Spokane. Participated in most of the items on the agenda, including the Legislative Steering Committee, the Federal Issues Committee, and all the side meetings that typically take place in those conferences, which is where most of the value really is, frankly. Benton Franklin Council of Governments meeting on Friday of last week, then another meeting yesterday to approve budget for 2022, and we'll be seeing annual Council of Governments assessments coming to Franklin County. They're only marginally more than they were last year, and I don't believe we've had an increase in several years, so they're de minimis. And then yesterday had a Hanford Area Economic Financial Investment Trust, the HAFIC Board loan meeting.
Commissioner Mullen?
I too attended Wasatch, the County Leaders Conference in Spokane last week. Attended classes on the opioid crisis, running of county meetings, and then also the economic outlook. Other than that, it was a good opportunity to talk with other leaders throughout the state, and that's about what I have for last week, so.
All right, well, Wednesday, I attended the Columbia River County's caucus meeting about the treaty between us and Canada, what's transpiring there. I had to leave that meeting to attend the Port of Pasco public briefing on TIF, tax increment financing. Friday, another Port of Pasco meeting on their budget and where they're heading, and trying to free up funds to start more projects in Franklin County. Very informative meeting. I was glad I was in attendance of that one. Monday was the certification of the 2021 November general election. And today we finalized that at 2 o'clock. So with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody on the phone, Keith?
Not at this time.
Is there anybody in the audience for public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is John Rose, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. First of all, I did attend the audit from the state last week as far as the actual election in the ballot counting. Thank you. And basically was pretty impressed with what the state had in mind and what happened as far as the results. We passed with 100% flying colors. I have one comment, maybe one suggestion, maybe two. The actual end result on the computer, we had the ballots in the hand. The auditors, had the ballots in their hand, and the computer gave us a choice of that electorate, one or the other. It was Amy and Michelle. The actual audit was conducted on them. So we put the information into the computer. This is who it was chosen based on that, and then the computer would tell us whether it's right or not. I believe to make that crystal clear that the machine is not going to alter, or if you will, manipulate, the actual software manipulate, that we actually do one of two things. One, we ask the engineers to rewrite the program so that we see the results and then approve it. In other words, the approval is done by the auditor himself, a human being, rather than the computer. Or leave the software alone and actually answer them incorrectly. You have two choices. If Amy was the one chosen on my ballot and I chose Michelle, it should come up as an error. 100% error is a valid test. Just a suggestion that perhaps to make it crystal clear that what's in that machine, what we have in that ballot, is accurately reported. Just a thought. This is a side note. Being a I need to say this just right. I'm on limited income. I'm fixed income, and my taxes on my property was $287,000 in 2017. I'm a little nervous about experiencing that, but nevertheless, my point being that this coming year it'll be $487,000. I'm sure your properties probably reflect the same thing. That's quite a boost to 60% of that goes to the schools, and then of course others. That's quite a boost to the county, to the schools. But it also puts me and many others. I'm pretty fortunate, manage our money well. But that really hammers us, and John has been very, very helpful in trying to basically guide me through what could happen as far as reducing those, if indeed I guess it's a poverty level or anything else, I reach that and can't pay the taxes. Anyway, one last thing I have, if I may approach the bench.
Absolutely.
This is just, I'm sharing some information with you that
Thank you.
perhaps you have, perhaps you don't have. Yeah. I'll go through this as quickly as I possibly can. The first thing you see, may I have an extra minute?
John, I tell you what, we have another period. We'll go over at that time, okay? 'Cause
Okay.
your time is up.
I
And we
gotcha.
do have another public hearing later on, and we can go over at that time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
No.
Okay. Alrighty, then we'll move down to the closed record hearing, public hearing, CUP 2021-09, CUP 2021-10, CUP 2021-11. And at this time, Derek will present, and I will open the closed record public hearing.
I apologize. There. Thank you. Yes, this is a combined or consolidated public hearing and presentation regarding three proposed conditional use permits submitted by the same applicant who has either ownership or agency over three properties that are all adjoining in the, basically between Road 57 and Road 60 in the
Karen, is that coming in okay?
Am I all right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, if you put that one, I'll just bring it to the other side.
Okay. So all of these are a request to basically replicate the same structure on three properties. And the request is a deviation from height limits as allowed in the RS20 zone. The properties are located to the north of Warnett Road, west of Road 57, east of Road 60, and south of Livingston. They're addressed as 2604 Road 57, 2509 Road 60, and 2515 Road 60. Parcel numbers are as described in this lots 1, 3, and 4 of short plat 2020-1. This property, 09, actually has a house on it that has recently been completed. 11 has a house that's about, the walls have been built, but it's still in process. And then this one is vacant at this time, but intended for a residential build. Each of these are approximately an acre, and this is close to 2, or it's just over 2.4 acres. Comp plan is low-density residential, zoning is RS20, residential suburban. I apologize for this, and this is one thing I wanted to bring up, is there's a lot of different ways to measure heights, roof heights.
And Franklin County's adopted a as measured from the midpoint of the roof. So what happens is we take the distance between the top plate, basically where the walls stop, and then start becoming the roof line. We take that height, then we take the peak height where the actual building peak, the roof peaks. We divide that by 2 and then add that to the wall height to determine this height limit of 18 foot as measured from the midpoint of the roof. Initial analysis, because of some of the verbiage used in the application, was we mistakenly believed that that was 19.5 feet or 19 and a half feet. Turns out, actually, after we ran analysis, more detailed analysis, that it was 20.6 feet. So not half a foot, but 20.6, so it's a hair over. That is what's in the resolution. It's a peak height for the structures of 23 feet with a, as measured from the midpoint, the request is to go to 20.6 feet, which is 2.6 feet above the 18-foot limit. That's standard. Folks have a right to apply for a conditional use permit to deviate from that, or the square footage requirements or limitations, and hence that's why this has been brought. The thing is all 3 of the applications are the same, with the same structure being built, and hence, after consulting with legal and the applicant, it was agreed that we would do this presentation as a single, but each resolution does require, or each CUP does require its own approval or denial vote. And your packet did have copies of resolutions for each of those individual applications.
Derek, would you prefer questions as we go or at the end?
However the board would like.
Okay, a couple of quick questions. And again, it's closed record hearing, so if I ask anything that's not in a record, just tell me it's not in a record. Excuse me, you referenced the midpoint of the roof, and it sounded like you said you measured from the top plate, which is the top of the wall.
Correct.
You measure that vertically to the peak, not on the slope of the roof, correct?
Correct.
So the midpoint is a true vertical height, and
That runs right smack down the middle of the roof line, if you were to look at it.
right, but again, it's, the measurement is vertical, it's not off the pitch or the slope.
Correct, correct.
And I know this, but I wanted it to be clear. The other thing is, these are all 3 separate legal lots already. And so that other applicants who may want to take the same path, even though these are all co-joined into one application, they are in fact 3 separate requests, and there are permit fees for each of them separately.
Yes, actually, initially, they were all submitted individually.
But again, the question
Right.
is, they were 3 separate applications.
They are.
That each had their own permit, their own fee.
Yes.
I'm just getting this on the record, so if someone else wants to come in and do a subdivision with 30 roofs and wants to do it all on one permit,
No.
it's 30 separate ones. So just
That is
wanted to clarify that.
Yes, yes.
And then on the, I think you've described well that the code allows 18 feet as the standard, and the request here is an additional 2.6 feet, not 2.5 feet, not 2 feet 6 inches, but 2.6 feet.
Correct.
That gets us to the midpoint of the roof.
Yes.
Then you also talked about a peak. Now, is that the ridge line? Is that the top of a cupola? What do you use for that?
It's, yeah, the literal top of the building, the highest point of the structure.
The highest point of the structure?
Yeah.
Whatever it happens to be. And is there a limit on that? They could put a 12-foot spire, make it look like a church?
Well, yeah, when we start getting into spires, and there's some accoutrements like, say, antennas or weather vanes or things, sorry, that aren't considered in that height. It's the literal structure height.
Okay, well, again, it's closed record, so only things that are
Yep.
in the record or in the ordinance that you've cited.
Yes,
So that max height is generally the ridge line, but there are exceptions? Ridgeline being the
There
peak of
are,
the gable.
there are amenities or non-structural related things that can breach that height
Right.
within limits.
But a
yes.
permanently affixed cupola could add 3 or 4 feet.
And those are generally, and then the reason I'm saying that is because what people define as a cupola can be different. So,
Understand.
But generally, like, yeah, the little, that's the box on top where the weather vane, that wouldn't be included in the height. It's
Okay.
that ridge line,
All right, thank you.
yeah. So so this should be a 20.6 foot, not 19.5, so. Wherever you see that, just please insert 20.6. I apologize. And like I said, the resolutions are accurate. It's just in some of the presentation documents. So as mentioned, the 09 property, that's the L-shaped one, that's 2.41 acres. The other two are 1 acre properties. There's a single-family dwelling on the 2.4 acre property, and then 11, which was the north, and I apologize, that should be 10, and this should be 11. Here are the proposed site plans for the various sites. So this is 09. The proposed building is here. And this one, it's in the back. They have to go around the septic field, so that's why this driveway is wonky like that instead of shooting straight back.
And so Derek, this CUP is building height only, right? Doesn't affect any setbacks or location relative to structures or houses?
Or square feet, yeah. In this area, there's also a limit on the amount of square footage based on the primary structure.
Yeah, but this
these all
CUP
meet those.
is just for building height, right? It's
This
not a
is
square
correct.
foot deviation?
This is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. This is the existing home on the parcel for 09. Like I said, for 10, there's I believe it was 10. I do apologize, I'm not feeling 100%, so I'm a little, anyways. So all 3 CUPs were processed simultaneously. Each, the staff agencies received each application separately, but they were all mailed. Agencies were notified, property owners were notified, everything was done on August 5th. We published the notice for the hearing on August 19th. We did have some inquiries regarding the signs that we post whenever there's a hearing. But they were just asking what was the proposal. One person did have some concerns regarding height, but also acknowledged others in the neighborhood had done the same at some point in time. So approach permits will be required from Public Works. Ecology, again, standard letters. These, it should say that 09, 10, and 11. I apologize. This is basically, we got the same comments. Everything was replicated except for the address and those other details, like the status of the development on the property. The proposed use is in the RS20. It was determined it will not, and these are as proposed by the Planning Commission with assistance of staff. Proposal will not adversely affect public infrastructure. It'll be constructed, maintained to be operated in harmony with the existing or intended character. There's other buildings already up. Differences in elevations, you're not even going to necessarily, if you're off the property, know. Is that because of structure height, or is that just a difference in grade? So it shouldn't make much of an impact on the skyline. Same with these. Again, it's just a storage building, so it's not going to produce more noise or other disturbances to the neighborhood beyond what would normally be seen in the area. And it won't hurt, there's no increased risk of the public health, safety, or general welfare. Relatively straightforward conditions associated with this proposal if approved. Building permits will be required. It has those, and this is another reason why they'll blend in, is because they'll need to match the building, the primary structure. So if they put on, like that picture we saw had stucco, these storage buildings will also have to have matching stucco color, and the roof materials will also have to match. So they'll be coordinated or with the actual structure built. At least 50% of the primary structure has to be completed before we can issue the permit. So it's not like they're going to be starting on a storage building and then no house shows up. Under Franklin County Code, you have to be at least 50% complete with a primary structure before you can build an accessory structure.
So Derek, would you clarify something? I'm thinking I understand your intent. You got 3 lots. One has a house that's done, one has a house that's under construction, and one has not started.
Correct.
And a conditional use permit, by definition, is a permit. And you've just told us that you can't issue a permit until 50% of the house is finished. So
Building permit.
You meant a building permit. And is it in any way out of the ordinary or problematic to issue a conditional permit ahead of the building permit? In fact, it maybe is necessary so that you do it properly?
You just nailed it.
Okay, all right, that's good.
Yep.
I just like to
Yeah.
clarify this stuff. I think sometimes it, excuse me, maybe helps other people and lets me make sure I got it right. Thanks.
Yep. Again, so one of the conditions that is recommended is the applicant submitted plans. That's what we based all of our stuff on. Therefore, if they seek to deviate, what we're approving is the specific plan set. So if they choose to deviate from 2,400 square foot, and this, of course, as mentioned, should be 20.6, not 19.6. If they seek to deviate, go bigger than that. Smaller is always okay, but if they try to go bigger. So this is almost a pre-approval for these parties to, if they meet certain conditions, then they can move forward with this height deviation in advance. They'll know what they're going into. And this is a suggested motion for 09. I have a suggested motion for each of the CUPs. So it's 09, that's 10, and that's 11. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So we'll make a motion on each of them as an individual, but you presented them as all in a group.
Correct. And
Okay.
there's an individual resolution for each in the
Yes.
packet. Yeah.
Is there any questions?
Derek, excuse me, I don't recall in the last 13 years of doing this, us ever declining to approve one of these building height CUPs. Do you recall us ever having? Well, I don't want to go outside the record, so I think it's safe to say that this application that's been presented is of a type that is commonly, but not necessarily always approved.
I would concur with that.
Okay, thanks. It goes to another issue that's outside the record, so I don't want to go there now.
Is there any time frame for this particular one where the house hasn't been built yet?
A conditional use permit has to be acted upon within 6 months. So they would need to start construction on that property and then submit for the conditional, for the building as well. And they can do that simultaneously. It's just we won't issue the permit for the accessory structure until they've hit basically 50% of inspections, basically. When they're
Alright.
about halfway through with their, they got the shell up or something like that to where it's basically the house is being built as opposed to not. And that's exactly why we do it that way. We don't want storage buildings built on because they're accessory uses without a primary use. So you've got to get 50% of the primary use completed before we'll issue the permit. But that has to be submitted for within 6 months of approval.
All right, thank you.
So Derek, even though there's a few different numbers in there, all three of these CUPs are for a midline roof max height, 20 feet, 20.6 feet, right?
Correct.
Because the numbers kind of
Yes,
dance a little
it's
bit, and those are
20.6 feet.
typos, I know.
And it should
Okay.
be a peak height of 23 feet. That's the,
20.6 feet. And-
midpoint measurement of 20.6, peak height along the ridge line of 23 feet.
Okay, and the 18-foot base that's automatically approved in that zone is top plate of the wall, midpoint of the roof, or
Midpoint of the
peak?
roof.
That's
All
the
of our
midpoint.
accessory structure height are measured out of the
Okay.
midpoint of the roof.
Is there any other questions? At this point in time, then, I will close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion. Motions.
I move that Franklin County Board of County Commissioners adopt the 6 findings of fact and 9 conditions of approval as adopted by the Planning Commission, detailed staff report and approved case file CUP 2021-09.
Second?
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Mr. Chairman, move to approve CUP 2021-10 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Move to approve CUP 2021-11.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, Derek, we'll move down to the closed record hearing, public hearing, closed record public hearing, CUP 2021-12. And at this time, I will open the closed record hearing. So go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I apologize, there's no PowerPoint for this. I didn't grab it when I left or headed over here this morning. So this is a request by the old, this is a request by the Old Apostle
Is this the Old Apostolic Church application?
Apostolic Church, thank you. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
And this is a request to construct a church off of Taylor Flats Road. All right. I'm gonna have to use in your packet, you do have a PowerPoint presentation that was presented to the Planning Commission. I'm going to work off of that because it just has the facts summarized pretty quick, and it's relatively straightforward application. The property is located to the north of Clark Road, south of Self Landing Road, east of Taylor Flats Road, and west of Glade North Road. There's no current address as it's vacant. The parcel number is 124-340-043, and the legal description is northwest. Okay, that's one of those legal. descriptions except for the 30, so it's northwest 4NW4. The legal description's in the packet. This one's a little convoluted. Usually I can read them better than this, but this one's vague. I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, apologies for the interruption, but I missed it. Did we open the hearing on this?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
So it's an approximately 10-acre parcel, or wait, no, it's not 10 acres. It's 40 acres, yeah, all right. Comp plan designation is agricultural, zoning is agricultural production 20. The request is to build a church facility with 393 parking spaces. 8 spaces will be ADA compliant. A maintenance building, a private cemetery, and access road to Taylor Flats Road. Property size is approximately 40.32 acres, but the area to be used is 2.46. In the near term, they will continue most likely to use the remainder for farming or whatever use is currently in place. Features the site plan provided, features a church, maintenance building, private cemetery, and access road locations, as well as the parking area.
Derek, would you mind moving that with the heating system? It's a little hard to hear.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, I can barely hear you,
I'm
honestly.
sorry, and I'm soft-spoken, so it's just weird.
Just get right up close to that mic, it helps a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
The property is primarily vacant. Right now, it's just kind of in step, scrub type of stuff. It's not being used as an active farm or anything at this point. However, it is surrounded on 3 sides by active crop circles. And then behind it is a Lammert, a local area more intense rural development of 5-acre lots. There's that are about a third developed at this
16
point.
of them, I think.
Is it 16?
Yeah.
Yep, 16. Access road will be utilizing 2 easements granted to Franklin County from Burlington Northern and Bureau of Reclamation. So it comes off of, just as you get north and Taylor Flat starts curving, is approximately where this is. The access road will extend from the northwestern edge of the site and terminate at Taylor Flats Road. Staff provided all the appropriate notice to agencies, property owners, posted the property, issued the SEPA, and provided notice in the Franklin County Graphic on September 2nd, 2021. Public Works comments regard that the proposed access to the site will need to be designed per county standards. The new road will need to be accepted into the county road system and is required to be a hard surface. Turn lanes will be required on Taylor Flats Road. An approach permit is required for access to Franklin County roads. Any utility extension crossing Franklin County will be addressed at the time of the application, just because you don't know specifically where they're going to come across until you see where they're going. Ecology provided their standard comment response letter. Big Bend Electric sent a response email dated September 13th, basically stating that they're aware they'll have to remember, right, this project is outside of their area and it's in Franklin PUD, and they didn't have any issues with the proposal. Again, they come into play more at the time of actual construction.
Derek, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I'm sorry, the electric companies don't tend to have much comment unless there's something strange, like there's a big power line or something. Generally, they just say, yep, we're aware of it, and then they'll coordinate with the people at the time of actual build. They don't provide comments usually for standard, unless there's something.
So is there anything in the record that you can speak to that talks about a second entry or exit? I mean, I'm seeing one road from the church out to Taylor Flats, there is another power line that comes north off of Clark right to this same property. Is there anything in the record that talks about a second ingress or egress?
No.
Okay, thanks.
The property is located in the AP 20 zoning district, and churches are listed conditional uses in the AP 20 zone. The proposal will not adversely affect public infrastructure once the mitigations or conditions are installed. If not open to, okay, that's why I like my other PowerPoint better. I had actually fixed most of this stuff in it, I apologize. But the proposal will be constructed, maintained, and operated to be in harmony with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity. The proposal won't be more objectionable to nearby properties by reason of noise, fumes, and vibrations. The operation in conjunction will not be more objectionable to, or will not endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare if located where proposed, again, assuming the transportation mitigations are put into place, like the turn lanes and things like that. Parking area will need to meet standards as expressed in Franklin County 1778-090. Parking, handicap parking areas to be designated. Access to the property will need to utilize those specific access easements outlined, AFN 313129 and 382468. Proposed access to the site will need to be designed per county standards. It will need to be hard surfaced, and turn lanes will be required on Taylor Flats Road. And the suggested motion is that that you can find on the ASR. This motion is intended for the Planning Commission. The ASR states suggested motion of pass resolution number 2021-269, granting approval CUP 2021-12 based on 6 findings of fact and 17 conditions of approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Derek, you referenced turn lanes, plural. I can imagine a turn lane on Taylor Flats as you're southbound, where you might be turning left to go to this church. You're not anticipating a turn lane for the northbound traffic, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, there would be a left turn lane.
Right.
I don't know that there'd be a deceleration lane on the right.
Well, that's what I was going to ask
Yeah.
next, is on the right-hand side for those traveling north, would there be a deceleration and would there be?
That would be my belief, and that's why it's references lanes.
Okay, so.
We're not transportation people. We may use the wrong terminology.
Okay, well,
I see.
let me just go with my questions. And
Okay.
so the question was, turn lane for southbound, I heard a yes. Deceleration lane for the northbound, I heard, I don't know. And acceleration lane for northbound for traffic leaving the church. Do you know if there's one there?
I don't.
Okay, so the reason I ask is, are those criteria that we're obligated to consider in this closed record hearing for approval or disapproval?
Transportation impacts are to be considered. Staff relies on the comments from Public Works, and then we just take those verbatim and place those as conditions.
Okay, so we're relying on the input from Public Works, and I see Matt's here, and I
Correct.
think the chairman was headed there next. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes, I see Matt was making a motion, and as long as we're talking about the turn lanes, Matt, if you would come.
This is something certainly we can discuss because there was lengthy discussions about this during the actual hearing itself with the Planning Commission. Our requirements is that they follow Franklin County design guidelines. Those guidelines refer to the AASHTO manual, to the DOT, the Washington State Department of Transportation design manual, which requires all of those types of turn lanes and facilities to be evaluated. And so I don't want to make an assumption right now of everything that will be there. I think we can all be pretty confident, even based on our conversations then, that a left turn lane is going to be required, but whether it requires, say, a right turn lane or a right turn pocket, which are two slightly, or even right turn tapers and all of those, those evaluations will be done by a licensed engineer, which will be reviewed by our office and our county engineer to make sure that the evaluation and the facilities are all done in compliance with those design manuals that we call out in our design guidelines. So I hope, does that?
No, that does. That's
Okay.
exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
And of course, this will be at their expense
Yes.
with our road department doing the installation.
At that point, we're just a reviewing agency, and we're a reviewing agency at that point, but all their plans are required by law to be completed by a licensed engineer, but no construction can happen on a county facility unless it's been reviewed and approved by the county engineer. That will all have to happen in this case. So, yeah, we'll be verifying their engineering evaluation and doing our own, in doing so, typically what we do is our own evaluation to ensure that they're in full compliance.
Yeah,
We're not doing any construction.
No,
That's
we
not
will-
what, we don't do that.
They're responsible for all construction.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at 393 car spots. And usually everybody waits till the last minute to get to church. I can only imagine how this is going to be. So I think we really need those turn lanes and acceleration lanes.
I'll tell you what I told the Planning Commission. We're going to be looking at this very closely just because of the nature of Taylor Flats.
Yep.
Taylor Flats is our busiest road in
Yep.
Franklin County, so absolutely.
Thank you. Questions? Any other questions?
The access road that's private, so they're responsible for their own maintenance of that road?
Derek, I think that question was for you.
Yeah, I know, I'm thinking now. I'm trying to remember if,
I can help them out on that.
because usually when they
Until
build
built
it.
and adopted by the county, right, Matt?
Correct.
One of the recommendations, of course, is that road right now is, there's an easement there, a public easement, but they have to construct it to county standards. And at that point, certainly, it could be adopted into the county road system because it has to be built to county standards. We put in there using a minimum of a 400 ADT, 400 vehicles a day. And so that stipulation was part of our stipulations in the packet. And at that point, the board, when it's built to county standards, we would bring that to the board for consideration to be adopted in the county road system,
Right.
at which time we would take over maintenance.
So it's not automatic.
It's not automatic.
Okay, thank you.
We will bring it to you as to whether you want it to stay private or adopted into the system.
All right, thank you.
Any requirements on that road, if it was to be brought into standards, would it be paved or gravelled?
It has to be paved.
It'd have to be
The
paved.
current county standards that this board has adopted is that for a road to be brought in, we're not accepting gravel roads, we're accepting
Thank you.
paved roads.
And
yes.
it's also recommended regardless of whether it's private or public, that it be hard surfaced.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, Derek, the approval, should the board approve this conditional use permit today, it comes with a list of conditions of approval, but there are effectively a great many other conditions of approval when we say that it has to comply with the code, has to comply with road standards from Franklin County. So my observation, and tell me if I've got this correct, is just because this package doesn't specifically call out a requirement for turn lanes or acceleration or deceleration, those still could be required if, in fact, under AASHTO or state road standards, or perhaps the sightline curves to the north of this entry, any of those things could bring additional requirements for that road. So just because it's not called out in this CUP doesn't mean those won't be required, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
We good? No more questions? So at this time, I will close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of CUP 2021-12, Old Apostolic Lutheran Church of Tri-Cities as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2021-12, and on the agenda, I noticed we have a 2021-269. Are we covering that in this motion?
Would you prefer we move to the resolution or the CUP number?
Derek?
That's however.
Either or, doesn't
Either
matter.
works,
Okay.
right.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, with that, we'll move
Thank
down. Thank you, Derek. We'll move down to administration office business.
The only business I had today was the budget hearing. I think that's on the schedule for
Yes, it is.
public hearing for the budget.
Did I miss that? Yes, the public hearing. Excuse me, I went right over top of it. Yeah, at this time, I'll open the public hearing for the Franklin County 2022 budget. So Keith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Invite Tom and Tim to come to the dais to walk us through the budget balancing spreadsheet that they have worked tirelessly on. I really appreciate the effort that the auditor's office has assisted my office in coming up with.
We made a couple of minor changes.
Oh.
Thank you.
We didn't need to bring new materials in, but it's very similar.
Do you have highlighted what changed?
I think most of it, and we can go with them.
Some of our estimates change as we get closer to the end of the year and have a better idea of what actual cash flows are going to be. So these do get updated periodically. Just in terms of general highlights, we are going to be asking the board to make some preliminary decisions today that will then be translated into resolutions for the board to consider next week and to actually vote on those items then. A couple of high-level things, and Tim and Tom, I know, are going to walk through this spreadsheet, but just for the board to consider, we have approached philosophically over the past few years the idea of trying to reduce our road shift each year by an additional amount. We will have several, at least 3 different proposals to consider today on that item. We also know that cost of living is going up, and we've had some discussions regarding our labor contracts. So this budget proposal will include a proposal to have a general cost of living increase of about 3% with an additional $350 per month increase to benefit contributions for employees. Those are going to be some important things for the board to be aware of. Tom and Tim, I'll kind of turn the microphone to you. And
Okay, sure. I'd be happy to walk through this. Good morning, Commissioners, Keith and Karen. At the top, we start basically where we started the budget workshop, preliminary budget, where revenues exceeded expenditures by the $364,886. And that number is slightly different because we've had a few different little changes because of like the FMLA percentages and that sort of thing. So it's very close to the number that we started with. We talked to Keith, and the second session here is for revenue adjustments that we thought we could look at. The top three are due to sales taxes. The budget came in from the treasurer's office at 5.3 million, but this year we're expected to get over 6 million, and we don't see the trend going down. So we felt comfortable adding 800,000 to general sales taxes, 225 to our juvenile correction facility sales tax, corresponding 135,000 for our 0.3% criminal justice sales tax. And then the next item is $200,000 that it was in the 2021 budget, but it hadn't actually been put in the 2022 preliminary. So we added that. But then if you can see 2 lines down, we took that out because after talking with Keith, it looks like we can probably use ARPA funds to fund that mobile command center. The $330,000 there is because of some grant money that we got from the state this year for legislation that the state passed that put extra burden on our criminal justice. The sheriff could speak better to that than I, but they received $384,000. Right now, we're carrying over, since this is dedicated to their uses, $330,000 increasing to our beginning fund balance. And then basically as a balancer, the last item is the $550,000. And that would be money that we would use from the ARPA funds to cover criminal justice salaries, that sort of thing. It's a similar way that we did this year. And I want to also say that everything on here is up to your decision. We were just trying to get something down in a framework that you could better look at it and make some decisions. So if you look at the columns 1, 2, and 3 are basically 3 scenarios that can maybe get us closer. Column 1 really is more if you passed all the available taxes to you and use the same road shift as this year. Okay, if you look at the next section, the post-preliminary budget decisions, these are things that we've done, the board has approved this year, but are going to affect next year's budget. The first one was the position in Office of Public Defense. That's going to add $27,000 to turn it from a contractual position to a Franklin County employee. And then due to the Blake decision, the clerk's office is going to receive about $114,000 in grant money for that to pay for those costs. But the feeling now is the expenditures are going to be probably $100,000 more than we're going to receive. So basically, there's a net increase in cost right now of $100,000. So those 3 changes that came in this year to affect next year add up to $109,000 more of an expenditures. And so this next section that's highlighted is really what the board needs to decide today as far as the tax burden. Column 1 is just presented there so you can see if the board approved the 1%, what's that called? The special needs of the, there's a name for that one. The 1% sales tax. Substantial needs. Substantial needs, thanks, Tim. That's the substantial needs that is available to the county, 1%. The 1.2 million is the 2021 amount that we use for the road shift. The 99,567 is the bank capacity for the 1% that the board did not elect for 2021. And then the 12,000 was an updated figure from the assessor's office to get us closer to the actual amount, and that's carried all the way across since it's just an adjustment there. But if you can see the second line down, that's the road shift suggestions or options. I mean, it can go all the way down to 0, and I'm sure it could go up, but we just started at $1.2 million, drop it by 300 at 9, and then drop it down to 750, just to see where that would get us. So that first green subtotal is $3.7 million in the column 1, 3.2 column 2, and then 3 million in 3. Basically, these are the available resources to fund any requests that came in over the baseline amount, which we'll go over in the next section. Keith mentioned this briefly on the cost of living items, which are included in on that contingency amount. We're in 2021, we have 440 in the budget, but right now, in this preliminary budget, there's $1.86 million, which would cover the COLA and the medical increase that Mr. Johnson was talking about. The second item is really a housekeeping thing where we budgeted $500,000 in 2021 to transfer into our reserve fund if our beginning fund balance was over $7.5 million, and it came in like at $7,640,000 or so. But this year we're putting it in its own line item, so it's easier to identify in the budget. So basically, anything over $5 million, at least the first $500,000, the board will allow to transfer into our reserve funds to help that get caught up. The next item was related to the beginning fund balance, $330,000 for the sheriff department legislation costs. And so we're carrying over in expenditures $384,000, and that number could shrink if the sheriff department uses those funds this year. So that basically that would be the whole amount spent next year. And then this next $500 is very minimal, but we need $500 to set up this new insurance claims fund that we've talked to the Budget Review Committee, and I know Keith has brought to the board during a meeting. It's basically a clearing fund, ins and outs, but due to our payroll being twice a month, for some reason, on some benefits, they don't end up with an even number, so we end up with all these little penny rounding things, and it takes a long time to balance. So we figured if the employer covered the cost, and $500 should last more than a year, it would save us a tremendous amount of reconciliation time, and it would operate as the internal service fund, where basically, when we do a payroll, all the expenses for benefits would come out of there. We transfer the money in there, and then we just write basically checks to our vendors like Vision Service Plan and our insurance companies and that sort of thing. And then the last number in that category was the ending fund balance adjustment to balance to column 3, and that's just a balancing figure of $308. So right now, column 3 is the only column that balances to 0. The next highlighted items are basically what the department heads brought to the board to decide. The yellow section here it's in summary. We went over the detail during the budget workshops, and Tim could bring it up if you have any particular questions for any department. But it's summarized by department under general requests, which would be like office supplies or travel, non-base tools, equipment, which would be like a snow blower or maybe a letter opener or something like that, kind of a one-time capitalized type of cost. And then the personnel related is if we hire a new employee, they need a computer or a desk, that would fall in that column. And so the grand total submitted by the departments in these general requests, which don't include personnel or capital, are $1,379,648. Does anybody have any questions so far? It's kind of a lot to look at, I realize. Since we have the ARPA funds, certain categories of items we can use for them, like policing services, cybersecurity, and so these next couple of sections are funds that we can take out of the yellow, which are general requests, and use our ARPA funds to pay for. So in effect, they're helping our deficit by moving them to the ARPA money category. The orange section here is for IS, and there's $345,000 for upgrades that they have listed. The green section is for the sheriff and corrections.
So Tom, are those, the orange, already included in the yellow, or are those removed?
Yes, the orange and the green are included in the yellow.
So if we do use those funds, we will remove them from the yellow, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
And so the green is the sheriff and corrections, broken out by the same general small tool categories and personnel, which are none, but those add up to $485,000 that we could potentially use ARPA funds for. So ARPA would basically be taking $830,000 out of the million about $1.4 million, leaving $551,000 to be funded basically from current expense. And then that was carried across for all three categories. So our subtotal here of our surplus or deficit before personnel and capital requests in column 1 with the full taxing is 1.3. The second column with 900,000 road shift but no increase in taxes is 850, and then the last column was 750,000 road shift, no taxes, would be a 700,000 surplus at this point. Now we're getting into the personnel costs. The next section here, the light, not sure what color that is, mauve. What do you think, Tim? Are basically the regrades, and we've listed those out by position. They add up to 25,202. And then those were carried across into, so they'll be subtotaled. It didn't change the green subtotal much, so I'll skip to the new position request and the pinkish orange section there. And so these are each position, these would be brand new to the budget, is why we kept them separate, because they would be ongoing costs going further. So they would take, new funding to take care of. There's a deputy assessor position, a real property appraiser 2. There would be an enhancement to one of our facilities position to make it full-time for the whole year instead of 6 months, 42,000. Network analyst and systems analyst, these are 2 positions in the IS department. The deputy prosecuting up in the prosecutor. And then HR requested a HR generalist totaling, grand total for everything is $524,759. So our new subtotal, if these were all approved by the board, first column 803,396, second column 300,000, and then the third column we have 150,000 surplus if everything above this is approved. The last section here is for capital requests that came in at $2,406,560. And after talking to Keith, he took out the email archiver appliance and the treasurer vehicle, so our new subtotal would be $2,365,560. Mr. Johnson went through the list and identified ones he believed, at least at the time, that we could use ARPA funds for. Those totaled $2,260,610, and that would leave a net hit to current expense, if these are all approved, at $150,950 in capital expenses. So basically now we get to the grand total. Column 1 with taxes, $652,446 surplus. No taxes, $900,000, road shift $150, and then $750,000 road shift option would be a balanced budget, with everything approved above us.
Thank you, Tom. That was a very good presentation, followed really easily. Keith, have you got anything to add to this?
I do have, kind of one recommended matter here in that first kind of, I'm not sure what color that is, orange or pink. It says personnel requests, the kind of the top third of the second page. The WSU extension position is just an increase in hours, and the same thing for the facilities position. The assessor and treasurer's positions, those have not been through a full HR review. And so I would not suggest that we not approve those, but I would want to make sure that we are only setting aside the money. So I would prefer to put that money in our contingency line, because there will need to be additional matters brought before the Board of Commissioners to approve those changes after HR's had a full review of those. So I wouldn't want to deny them in the budget setting process, but I don't think we're ready to fully approve those without going through that process.
And I might add here too that I know that our HR director is leaving. So the HR generalist,
Yes.
that may be something that may change on the new hire, do you think? We could possibly...
It could impact that depending on the timing. I would say all of those positions for the most part are going to require some recruiting time, so the $524,000,
Yeah.
that's fully loaded as if those those positions were filled on January 1st, which
Right.
is not likely to happen.
No.
So we will see some budget savings for 2022 for some of those positions, but they are new position requests, and they would have ongoing cost to the budget.
Is there any questions or comments from the commissioners?
So, first budget I recall working on here was the 2010 budget, and it was very much the opposite of what we're seeing here today. We were cutting and trying to get ahead of what we saw as a pretty significant recession coming our way. And the board at the time was, I think, pretty diligent, and we got ahead of it, and we weathered the storm better than most other counties in the state. Today, we're in almost the opposite situation. We've got a bunch of government money printing going on that they're giving us to us like it's free money. We're going to have to pay that bill someday, but for now, it's a lot of cash infusion to the county under ARPA funds. We've got a growth rate that is virtually unmatched in the state, so we've got a lot of property tax coming in from new construction, and that is over and above the 1% limit that we're normally constrained to. So we get, if we choose to take the 1% raw dollar increase, and that's not a 1% rate increase, but a raw dollar increase, even if we took that, we'd have all the property taxes from new construction on top of it. So that's sort of a summarized way of saying that financially we're a lot better off than I have seen us in a long time, and it's due almost exclusively to ARPA funds and growth and booming retail sales tax, which may or may not be tied to spending habits associated with COVID. So there's a lot of needs in the county. There are a lot of needs every year, regardless of what the revenue situation looks like. There's always needs. But I think the board ought to seriously consider banking the 1% this year as we did last year, realizing that a day will come when we're not as flush as we are now, and we'll be able to weather that storm a whole lot better if we have some bank capacity. It also serves to reduce taxes on citizens today and until such time in the future as if we actually need to use that. That's my first thought. The road shift and the efforts to reduce the road shift, I think, are good policy. I think I've always supported that. The opportunity to do that doesn't come along very often. Most years we're struggling to pay our bills, and the road shift is, in some years, many years, the only way we've been able to do that. Again, this year is different. So if there's a year not to take the 1%, if there's a year to further reduce the road shift, I think this is that year. It may require a little bit of trimming on what's been presented here, but if we're serious about keeping taxes down and reducing the road shift, this is the year to do it. Thanks.
I'm in agreement. I think that we should make the 1% and reduce the road shift. I believe we need to take care of our roads and our infrastructure before it deteriorates any more than it has. So I am in agreement there.
And I too am. I think that we should really consider column 3, reducing the road shift down to 750, no new taxes, and not taking the bank capacity that's put forth. And I think that with the additional funds that will be available through those salaries that won't be filled, we're going to be in good shape. As I've been sitting in on these budget meetings, we have been incredibly taking in a lot of money on sales tax. And what I think that's due to is people are shopping from home, and our county's reaping the benefits of the purchases in our county. Instead of going over to Benton County and the mall, they're buying here at home. And I think we're going to continue to see that. It's a trend that's in now, and people are very aware of the situation of being out in public, and they think they'd rather stay at home and shop. And with the increase of the valuations of these properties, we all are seeing the impact of higher taxes through the evaluation. So I think this is a time that we do just that, and we don't raise taxes, and we lower that road shift so our county road department can get busy and making these roads better, especially the one right there on the way into town that I was talking to Matt Mahoney about earlier. Had a pretty good jar in the old pickup coming in this morning. All righty, thanks, Matt. All righty, is there any other comments on the budget? Keith, anything more to add?
I've got a couple additional comments. We're looking at a number of positions here. My recollection is that this board, had previously approved a deputy county administrator position. Is that funded in this document, Keith?
Yes, that is. That's carryover from 2021, so it's included in the base.
Okay, well, there's an old saying that the cobbler's kids have no shoes, and the fact of the matter is this board, in our efforts to serve the other departments at sometimes the commissioner's office expense, I think it's past time that we get that position funded, so I'm happy to hear it's in there. I wanted to make sure it was. I think for now that's all. Thanks.
So
Only other matter that I would ask the board to maybe just speak to is the 3% COLA and the $350 contribution to benefits. If that's the will of the board, that's what we'll include in the proposal.
Are you looking for a motion or just consensus?
Consensus at this point. I mean, it won't be final, of course, until the board takes a vote next week, but
Yeah.
if there's a different amount, we'd like to know that now so we can implement that in the spreadsheet.
Commissioners?
I'm in favor of it. I believe we need to take care of the county employees with the shortage of the labor force that's out there. We need to retain as many employees as we can. It's getting very difficult to find qualified individuals for employment.
So I'll repeat what I said last time we discussed this, which is if you don't take care of your employees, somebody else will. And we've seen a revolving door in past years where we train up corrections officers or law enforcement, sheriff's deputies, and a year or two later they'd migrate on to some other department that had better benefits or paid a little better. So I agree with you, Commissioner Mullen. We need to take care of our folks, and this is a year when we actually may have the ability to do that, which is a nice change.
So Keith, I'm in agreement. And then I would like to ask, after this is all said and done, what do we have left with the CARES Act money and the ARPA money that is available?
Yeah, the CARES Act money was spent last year. We had a November 30th deadline of getting that all out the door. So it's gone, and the auditor's actually going through those things right now. But the ARPA funds, those were awarded this year. Those include spending on COVID costs, I think since March of 2021. We have until the end of 2024 to allocate those. We've received half of our allocation of $9.4 million, I think it was, half of the 18 and change. So this budget does include the intention to spend around $2 million, I think, of the ARPA funds. $1.8 million, yeah.
That was the revenue loss funds.
Yeah, we calculated the revenue loss. So there's kind of two ways of looking at those ARPA funds. There's some that's very restricted on what we can use it for, but the 1.8 million has calculated a revenue loss. We can use that for any purpose, and that's what's included in this part of the budget. We will be having additional conversations about the rest of the ARPA funds and the timing of when those will be spent. We have a number of proposals and projects that we'll be bringing before the board to consider. So the bulk of the money is still unallocated, and it's going to be sitting in our bank until we use it, but we are earning some interest earnings on that right now, which we can use for other purposes. But we will be bringing those projects and proposals for the board to consider at a future time.
And one other question is, with this fast-moving inflation that's taking place right now, we are approving a 3% COLA. If it turns out that this thing starts to get a hold of cost of living, this COLA is only good for 1 year, correct?
It is. It does build into the base, however, I mean, so we'll be expected to fund at least that amount next year. But yeah, we'll, I'm sure, have to take a look at what inflation is doing, cost of living is doing each year as we move forward.
Okay. Is there any other questions? All right, so it is a public hearing. If there's anybody that would like to come up to the mic and speak on this subject?
Good morning, Commissioners. I wondered if you could share, has there been anything in this budget allotted for, excuse me, for maintenance of the parking lot of the Hapo Center?
I can respond to that. The Hapo Center is in its own separate fund. It's not part of the general fund. Most of what we're talking about today is what we call the current expense, which means the general fund. We are looking at a number of upgrades for the Hapo Center. We're working with a consultant on our lighting and HVAC and heating and electrical systems within the facility. Some upgrades there and some options there that we will no doubt be using some ARPA funds for. But we have not specifically looked yet at the paving of the parking lot, but we know that it needs to be done.
Yeah, just if it goes much further, it'll require replacement instead of upkeep. Thanks.
One other question I have, Keith, is on the COLAs. Does that COLA include, I don't believe it does, our other electeds?
It doesn't include the electeds, but we will be bringing a resolution before the board for their.
For the other electeds?
For the, yeah.
Today or?
Not today.
Okay.
No, it'll probably be at the budget hearing, either next week or it'll be before the end of the year, though.
Okay. Is there anybody else public comment? So at this time, I will close the public hearing. Keith, you don't need any more action on that than what we've already done?
I don't think we need a vote today, do we, Tom?
Do you need to continue it to next Tuesday, probably?
Okay, with continuance, then I won't close the public record hearing. We'll leave it open until next Tuesday.
And we can have the resolutions and the new budget prepared for next Tuesday.
Thank you, Tom. Great job, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move down to administration office business. Keith, but you don't have anything else?
I don't have anything else. I will request an executive session here in a moment, though.
And that executive session will be on?
Litigation. Do you want me to state the?
Pertaining to?
Yeah, litigation or potential litigation, a discussion with the prosecuting attorney.
Okay. All righty, and with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment?
Again, my name is John Rose. This is the public health information for you. Right off the bat, you've got a population identified here in Gibraltar of 33,677. If you flip the page, you'll see that Gibraltar has had, according to their own website, and this is a Twitter feed, they've vaccinated 40,795, et cetera, et cetera. What they've done is they've actually vaccinated people coming in and off that peninsula. So they claim 118% vaccination rate. But you can see here in the Worldometer that the actual infection, they're having a spike. So they're talking about closing their Christmas celebrations. That certainly tells us a lot about how vaccines 100% affect a community. The next one I have here for you is July and to October, Rhode Island. And I would draw your attention, and I apologize, these are screenshots. I don't have fancy equipment to pull this off. If I get a PDF, I try that. But anyway, I apologize for the blurriness of some of this. You'll notice here that, well, I think it speaks for itself, but nevertheless, I want to draw your attention right down to the bottom line. It would seem that those who have been previously infected and wound up with another infection did okay. Underneath that, you'll see the U.S. mortality. This is excess deaths, a total accumulative excess deaths. You would hope that the public health guidelines are going to reduce that with time, but you'll see that the blue line, which is our current year, is actually greater than the green line, which is 2020. So we continue to lose more each year over time. The next sheet will give you basically, again, accumulation in a different form, easier to see. I would draw your attention to South Dakota, which is, I believe, 13th. And then, of course, Florida, Texas in there. They've been open. South Dakota's never been closed. You would think if that was true, that the policies that they pursue would be right on top. They're not. Kind of an interesting thing. Next I have for you India. India I brought to you last time, the province of the state of Uttar. India has 1.2 billion plus people. They basically have 4 times our population, yet they have 465,000 deaths. We have just under 800,000. On the next sheet, you'll see the actual new cases, daily new cases for India, which, as you can see, well under what we have on the next sheet, which is then the United States. New cases, deaths, active cases for India on the next page, you'll see are less and less versus us on the following page of daily deaths. The last one I have for you is an actual study out of Stanford. And if I could have you just turn to the graphs that you see here. Can I have just a few seconds? You'll see the graphs here, which basically give you an age, X and Y. And the very last, if you will, bar graph on the very last page that I've given to you, I want to point out the fact that those under the age of 19 have the same risk of dying from COVID as similar to having the odds of a sharp object taking their life. I put that out for your consideration so that you can have maybe some information you didn't have before. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Thank you again, Commissioners. I appreciate the sentiment that all 3 of you expressed when you immediately took into consideration of not raising taxes on your constituents. I appreciate that sentiment. It seems like that's an automatic solution from elected officials a lot of times, and appreciate that sentiment. Another different subject, wanted to point out that it was a little bit unique, and no disrespect meant at all towards our planning department, but I think we got a really good description of what overreach in government looks like when we seen the description of trying to figure out and to manage building height. I think that it puts an undue burden on the planning department to try to figure out this complicated algorithm, and I think, quite frankly, that it's ridiculous that we regulate to that level. I know a personal friend of mine that was building a building in Franklin County and was going through this juggling act, trying to figure this out and trying to understand. And finally said, watch this, got an excavator, lowered the ground to 18 inches and built his building. And so it's a description of somewhat of the absurdity of micromanagement sometime in government. No, this is something that, that I get to deal with very, very regularly. Another piece of that being, I believe that I heard described that we don't allow private gravel roads, that private roads have to be paved. Was that accurate?
That's not accurate.
Not accurate. Okay, that was, I didn't hear properly on that. I was really gonna hammer on that one, so I didn't hear correctly. Anyway, but I think that's an example that, that we get in too deep. If it takes that complicated of an algorithm to figure out the peak of somebody's house, I think we've gone in a little too far and over managed it. That's what I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the phone? Keith, anybody else for public comment?
George Dockstutter, 4951 South Landing Road. I got a couple comments about the Lutheran Church deal you gentlemen approved earlier. I've got a couple of statements to make. Notices weren't sent out properly. I asked to particularly be put on notice, and I got a notice Friday evening on my email. There was a hearing Tuesday. And I called Derek on it, and he says, well, you still got time. I says, no, I don't, because I've already called the attorney, and he can't make it. Because the neighbors wanted representation there for the hearing. That's all right. And I was given notice earlier on the first meetings. But I don't think this thing was thought out, and I do have concerns, and I appreciate all the stuff on the road on Taylor Flats, because that is a blind turn coming around the corner. And personally, I think you guys ought to get out there and personally look at some of these things before you approve them. And you need more than just a regular turnoff to the right to get off Taylor Flats to get in there, because there's gonna be potato trucks, apple trucks, cattle trucks coming right up that road at 55 miles an hour, and they're not gonna be able to stop when people are backing up to turn in there. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move down to executive session. Keith.
Thank you. We're requesting an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, litigation or potential litigation. Would ask that members of the board, myself and the clerk and the prosecuting attorney be allowed to participate. Up to 30 minutes, please.
Yeah, we could reserve the right to come out early.
Okay. I need to shut off this.
Keith, were you going to include me as well?
Yeah.
Yes, ask that Jen Johnson be allowed to participate. Is there anybody else?
Outside counsel.
And outside counsel as well.
Okay, we're out of executive session. We're going to go back into executive session for another 10 minutes into the same numbers. Okay, we've come out of executive session.